you know what nemesis means? A righteous infliction of retribution manifested by an appropriate agent. Personified in this case by an honourable count. Me. Personified in this case by an honourable count.
The people who are pulling the strings is the Italian Vatican. They actually are reptilian bloodlines from another planet. They're basically robots. And the evil people that are there, such as the Rothschilds, who suck blood out of children to get adrenochrome and stay young and beautiful forever. They pick them up and they take them to a submarine and go underground until they can get to Epstein Island, which is where they molest children.
And I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. Okay. What we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment.
Can you define Mr. Global?
Is the committee that runs the world. So
Okay.
there's a committee at the top that makes all the big decisions. And my nickname for it is Mr. Global.
Who's your best guess of who Mr. Global is?
I think you have intergenerational pools of capital, and right now they are over-influenced by occult.
Occult.
Yes, so I think you have interdimensional intelligence, which is operating, demonic intelligence.
Interdimensional demonic intelligence.
Yeah. Yep. So I think this thing about good and evil is real.
Greetings and welcome to Ancient Library and the second episode of Alien Civilizations. The Reptilians, reptilian humanoid ETs, shapeshifting creatures which may not even be extraterrestrial, but interdimensional, or the last possible type of origin, fictional. So in this video we will cover a couple things, including the aforementioned question of the actual properties of this term, reptilian shapeshifter, and also in another more pure extraterrestrial approach to the general question of the existence of intelligent humanoid reptile beings who got no connection to the terrestrial conspiracy mythos of evil reptilians who control our planet. And the last piece of the video will be covering the more mental and psychological effects of this, in my opinion, queen of all sinister conspiracies. Which is, even if it's not really a thing, still gets followed or simulated by some sick individuals via occult rituals, etc. But these people are normal humans with no greater abilities apart from a greater portion of sick inner distortion, resembling their actions, and so on, but more on that later. So first of all, we should talk about the definition or most known interpretation of the reptilian humanoid, which isn't very clear and maneuvers on a broad spectrum of possible definitions, ranging from normal alien beings from another planet to interdimensional demons, which literally possess or transform certain individuals to humanoid snakes or reptiles. So already here we are seeing the Halloween-like elements embedded in this broad conspiracy, which is found on many different levels or potential hierarchies on which the reptilian Anunnaki-type demigods are more or less located on the top of the hypothetical pyramid. This makes it hard to classify any complete morphology for these types of beings, which is the chapter I normally conduct after the intro of the Extraterrestrial Civilization series. And yeah, of course, these videos are conjecture, mixed with pattern recognition used on controversial data. But there's still value in exploring these concepts and establish a type of encyclopedia from which people can take a groundstock of information and unbiased interpretation, which I'm creating with these videos. But let's try to get together some kind of morphology for the infamous reptilian overlords. So the appearance of the classic reptilian is a humanoid form, with a variation of all kinds of from snake to dragon-like features. Compared to the last race or civilization I've covered in the series, the core sources for this interpretation are even more vague and mythical. There's some wild footage out there which does not really pass the smell test. Not even something similar to the elaborate work, like the skinny bob tape for the grey alien race. So for example, there are 2 less real data points to build or even theorize on things like the ape index, on the certain type of being we are covering in this video. For example, the lower body parts like legs and a potential tail are not really a thing, because many of the controversial witness reports are describing a process labeled as shapeshifting, which most of the time does not affect the whole body of the witnessed individual. For example, some unofficial witness testimony connected to a more creepy approach to the whole Epstein case. I digress, but the bottom line is, apart from getting a precise morphology, that reptilian shapeshifter can include all types of features we know from the reptilian animal world, and also includes things like dinosaurs, which are giving some marginal credence to the whole general concept of reptilian stuff being a good blueprint to survive and excel in our reality. I mean, they did rule this planet at some point, and according to our knowledge, without a certain impact event, this would be most likely still the case. Also included in the morphology aspect could be data coming from more mythical creatures from different areas around the world. Things like dragons and, for example, the Indian Nagas, and everything else which is connected separately to their own mythology.
Is there a name to the planet you visited?
Well, we call it the Nagaloka.
Nagaloka, the place.
I don't think it has any equivalent in modern astronomical terms.
But there are serpents here.
There are serpents here, but these serpents are different from that.
Is there no...
Here serpents are subsidiary to human beings. They are the major, and there are no human beings, except occasional visitors like us.
And I think, if I remember correctly, the serpents who transform themselves into the human appearance.
But that's only when they want to present themselves before human beings.
So they don't scare you to death.
But I was scared. When the first time I had an encounter, I was really, really scared.
Sure.
And I can't deny that, because can you imagine a snake talking to you?
No.
It's very terrible. It's like you see it only in fiction movies.
Well, not only talking to you, you yourself said that your teacher,
I was talking to him.
Hissed to the snakes.
Yes.
And they hissed back in a way that communicated.
Not snakes, one only.
One. But so that was their means
of communication. That is to...
You used to worry about being ridiculed for some of the utterances that come out of your mouth. I suspect you're over that fear.
Yeah, I'm still not completely over that fear, but when you talk about such things, usually you need to be very careful, because people might think either this guy is just bluffing or he's out of his mind.
No, you talk about it with conviction in such a way that it makes me wonder if this is a place of love, peace, and joy only, the way you describe these.
You talking about
Nagaloka. Is there no conflict there?
No,
war?
there is.
So these are the higher
different level. Yeah,
different types of.
In fact, Maheshwaranath Babaji told me that this being has come to resolve a conflict. He wanted some advice from me. So
he came to this world to learn about how to resolve a conflict in his own world.
He said, I need some advice, which means yogis who are still there in the physical body here, sometimes will be much more advanced than any intraterrestrial being.
This is what I mean. The details have so much information that you haven't shared with us.
So this clip is just one from hundreds, in which people claim to be in some kind of contact with something what we could call reptilian aliens, who are able to switch their form, therefore shapeshift. And I wanted to play this because it shows some non-evil or sinister mythological literature of reptilian shapeshifters, in this case called Naga, which are not totally unknown, but clearly not really connected to anything resembling evidence or solid proof. Especially for other unrelated, more sinister theories like reptile Anunnaki overlords which control our planet, and highlight the fact that reptilian humanoid mythology is present in many different ways around the globe. In the chakra system, also originating from literature around the same area as the Naga stuff, we also got the human spine, which is also labeled something to the effect of a snake or reptile energy of life. And we also got the reptilian brain, which isn't really reptilian in a substantial way, but this type of stuff clearly reflects some kind of energy connected with certain more times emotionally cold and rational qualities, which seem not only to be embedded in our culture and history, but in our body as well. So even without the ufology related perspective, the multifaceted multifaceted connections to some kind of serpent or reptilian energies is clearly present in all kinds of ways, embedded in our history, religion, mythology, and many more areas for at least thousands of years. So ironically, in the realms of ufology, the reptilians are not really an accepted thing, because their whole literature is moving on this vanilla conspiracy frequency, which is feared to taint the build-up of a serious attempt to approach UFO contact case data, etc. But in this video, I will detach a certain conspiracy from a more sober attempt to approach theories of intelligent humanoid reptilian life in our universe. I mean, if we think about the potential forms of life in the cosmos, our preconceived superficial notions of evil shape-shifting reptilians that rule our planet could be perceived insulting or even something similar to a thing we would call racism. Speaking from the perspective of a potential benevolent humanoid reptilian race which encounters our civilization, and therefore eventually this type of literature. I mean, if you really think about it in a neutral way, it seems really to be the case in such a scenario. So clearly there are some cases to find in the ufology realm of things, but I will stick my neck out and say most of them are more on the trashier side. With a few very rare exceptions, but there's one individual who got a lot to say about the reptilians, and that's David Icke.
This is a great friend of mine, Credo Mutwa. He's in his 90s now, from South Africa. I met him in 1998 when he called me and said, "How do you know about the Chitauri?" What the hell's a Chitauri? People, the children of the serpent. It's the Zulu ancient lore and legends of the Chitauri, reptilian entities manipulating human affairs. This is one species, because there are many of these reptilian entities, which Credo painted, because he's is an artist and a great talented man. Interestingly, when you put that next to Robert Ilomis's painting from 2009, that's much older, in a totally different society. The similarities are compelling. And this is the necklace of the mysteries. It's been stolen now, unfortunately, but I've seen it many times before it was. Credo Mutwa had this passed down as in the shamanistic stream. It's mentioned in accounts 500 years old. He reckons it's at least 1,000. And here you have the symbols hanging from, it's not a necklace really, it goes on the shoulder, it's extremely heavy. And the shaman goes around these symbols and tells the story of African history and indeed world history. And on the front is a very non-human entity with in come and get me mode. And here is a human woman. And this hundreds at least years of old artifact, that symbol is about the interbreeding between the non-human race and humans to create this hybrid bloodline. And there's more symbols on there, which I'll come to later. And I asked him, I said, well, it doesn't look very reptilian. And he told a story that I found around the world in different cultures, that this reptilian force, this Chitauri, as they call them, said, you never depict us as we really look. So some people did, but many people didn't. They just depicted them as completely unhuman, but not like they really looked. Now, this is a big-time important thing in relation to the world that we live in today and what controls it, who controls it. Because the ancient accounts, again, talk, and I've talked to people on the inside in the modern world who've confirmed all this from their perspective, that certain bloodlines were created to specifically represent these entities outside of human society, outside of human frequency range, in the human frequency range of visible light, to be the manipulators in our world of that which is manipulating our world. Because for vibrational and atmospheric reasons, they cannot come into our world except very briefly, or in technology which gives them a manufactured atmosphere, a manufactured reality in which they can come. In other words, they need representatives that are operating with invisible light to manipulate our world. That's what these bloodlines are.
So yeah, David had his own thing going on there, and at a younger age I've bought a book or two written by David Icke. And even if my opinion regarding most of his material changed, I still think we can learn something from his whole run he had with thousands of people listening to multiple hour-long live presentations. And not everything is wrong, but most of the crucial parts of his story are impossible to prove, to formulate it mildly. But the most important and also paradox thing is the potential fear his message created. But yeah, I'm not here to judge this man's work, but there's no way a video about reptilians is getting made without at least mentioning David Icke and his repertoire, which often resembles the foundation for mental breakdowns of people and sometimes even the initial trigger for very tragic situations and outcomes. So if one got a sensitive psyche or problems with fear, paranoia or schizophrenia, the following sequence could influence such people in the wrong way to a variable degree. It could be rather funny for others, so please watch until the end.
So waking up in a lab, this was not on the island. This was in New Mexico.
On the island, I saw him
Okay.
in the bedroom.
Let's talk about that first, and then we'll touch on this lab experience as well. So, can you explain what you mean by shapeshifting here?
Well, when I was in the bedroom with him, because he used to take me into that small bedroom, and it was always dark and really cold, and then it was almost like when he was orgasming or something. Like I looked at him and suddenly his face like grew like big like this, and then I saw these huge black eyes like this, and then a big mouth with this horrible tongue and like this sort of dragon horn stuff, which is like almost like the devil, or I mean I can't explain really what I saw, because I saw it like. I mean, I can explain it, but it's like so hard. I did paint it, but I burnt that painting because I just hated it. But I can paint it again. But I just, I saw him turn into this horrible, creepy thing. And I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't drinking alcohol. Nothing like that was allowed. But, like a lot of people think there were parties going on there. There weren't any parties. There was no alcohol. Absolutely not allowed.
Happened last March at a home in Tempe. Court paperwork shows Isaiah Gentry is accused of hitting his dad in the head with a statue before stabbing him 20 times with a steak knife. Police say Gentry told them he tried to kill his father because a, quote, shape-shifting reptile had taken over.
So first of all, and before I start giving some crucial context information regarding this just shown little skit, I want to say that as far as I'm able to judge this, I'm a very open-minded person. Sometimes, and especially in past times, people say maybe a little too open-minded in certain regards. And I think there's a great value in connecting dots and exploring mysteries, a thing I've done since I can remember things. And at a younger age, I was also captured by the reptilian overlord shapeshifter, mother of all conspiracy theories. But as I progressed through life, I've also noticed one, if not the most crucial thing to be aware of while maneuvering in these types of areas, and that's wishful thinking. Or to make it more precise, a circumstance in which people are following a certain theory and the subconscious search for information which confirms a certain trajectory of a theory or hypothesis. In this case, looking for videos which might support the reptile shapeshifter conspiracy, with footage or recordings depicting the process, furthermore rationalized with some alleged problematic effort to stabilize their human form, speaking from the perspective of the alleged reptilian shapeshifter. So even if on a very superficial surface level, one could argue that these things are connected, if we actually use the potential of our intelligence, we quickly arrive at problems for the theory. For example, the supposed shapeshifter. Why should a random news reporter or low-tier celebrity should be reptilian in the first place? These people are not really more important as the average human living on this planet. Second thing is the fact that these transformations only occur on cable TV of an older generation. Nowadays, this stuff don't really happen anymore. And if it's the case, it will most likely be a semi-professional live transmission. So I don't really want to waste any more time breaking down the screen artifact thing. And I want to also say that this is only one potential misleading part of the whole reptilian theory, and there are also effects caused by this type of stuff. Firstly, on the human psyche and mental wellness, and a second, effects which are pulling this whole plot in complete unserious realms, which is also wrong in my opinion, because there are still parts of the story which aren't so easily debunked and explained.
Why do you think your family got involved in these things?
It goes back for generations. It goes back for generations. I remember my father confessing that my oldest brother is 8 years younger than him. Is cyclical. With men, especially when they stifle it, they repeat the patterns, which I don't see as an excuse because I'm not a. But of course, this happens with men. And power and pressure to conform is excellent as a tool for silencing people. They told me that we belonged to the cult of Baal, B-A''A''L. They told me this with consistency while I was being abused. Now, what you can look up about the cult of Baal, information that is publicly available, is that it is thousands of years old. It is a Phoenician satanic fertility cult. And publicly, it's supposed to have been eradicated. But to my knowledge and my experience, it is not. This is what people perceive the Illuminati to be. It is a group of elites that practices forced and uses these crimes to control people. They happen to have a huge reach over politics and entertainment.
So there's funny, creepy stuff, and there's just dark stuff. And both things can be connected to the terrestrial lore of evil reptilian shapeshifters. The sex or fertility cult stuff obviously isn't proven to be connected to some extraterrestrial serpent race, but many people think all these things are just a foundation to enable a reptilian Anunnaki overlord-esque presence on top of the pyramid. All this stuff goes into potential bloodlines which are necessary for the presence of the evil reptilians, and I've decided to show this particular clip because it's actually one of the more grounded parts of the story, which isn't necessarily connected to aliens in any form. And even if this bloodline and breeding stuff isn't conducted for the sake of summoning alien reptile overlords, it still seems to be somewhat present in our current world, more than ever. And now I want to shift the whole frequency of this episode in a more bright and positive state. So like I've mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to separate this sinister conspiracy from the core question, which is the potential existence of an extraterrestrial humanoid reptilian race. Approaching this concept from other angles than the previous and most of the time in general most prevalent one if talked about reptilians in general. So clearly we can't just take our terrestrial reptile animals and extrapolate up the evolution ladder while mixing their genetic material with our, I will say, more pure humanoid genetic blueprint, to create something similar in appearance as the previously discussed intelligent reptilian humanoids. But if there are other planets located in Goldilocks zones and similar properties to support the creation of intelligent life, the chances are relatively high, at least in my opinion, to expect the reptile strain to take over. Even if we operate in a total Darwin viable scenario in the framework of this thought experiment. One of the reasons for me to think that is the fact that creatures we call dinosaurs allegedly ruled over this planet for millions of years, and without certain circumstances created by a huge, today people would say a black swan event, namely the huge meteor impact who slowly eradicated this reptilian form of life on this planet, and at least according to our accepted history cleared the space for us, intelligent human life. So even if the dinosaurs weren't exactly something which could be described as intelligent reptilian life, it still was the most dominant form of life on this planet. And even in coexistence with us, there are still some special animals present, like crocodiles, alligators, chameleons, and a very special one, brought up through some kind of isolation on a single island, the Komodo dragon, which in my opinion is the closest thing we have on this planet to a reptilian humanoid, if it would only walk on two legs. Yeah, in the end, there is to say that personally I can imagine many planets on which a different scenario of evolution could have played out, with the result of intelligent reptilians being on top of the existing food chain. So if the universe is really endless, sooner or later we should encounter one of them. Hopefully a civilization which doesn't mirror our product of the world-famous conspiracy theories depicting them as the most evil thing creation could come up with.
Egyptologists Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, and I also believe Robert Schoch are accepting of the claim that the Giza pyramids are Old Kingdom, dynastic constructions built during the 4th dynasty. Because, as well as the debated evidence, such as the Khufu graffiti in the relieving chambers of the Great Pyramid, Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock have also presented astronomical evidence, and how the shafts of the Great Pyramid align with key constellations in the night sky around 4,700 years ago. The southern so-called air shafts point towards Orion and Sirius, two hugely important astronomical objects to the ancient Egyptians, whilst the northern shafts point to the circumpolar stars. The King's Chamber northern shaft lines up with one star specifically, and this one is known as Thuban. And this specific alignment has hit the news this week, just shy of 30 years after the claims were first made by Robert Bauval and Adrian Gilbert in their book The Orion Mystery. And this time it isn't being made by another alternative researcher, but it is being mentioned by academia. 4,700 years ago, around the time of the building of the Giza pyramids, according to conventional dating, Thuban was the pole star, the point which the stars in the night sky circle, and it makes sense that the Egyptians must have held Thuban in high regard. But as news reports show this week, Thuban is no ordinary star. Researchers have discovered that Thuban is actually a binary star, a small star and a large one. They circle one another, and this is a new discovery for scientists at NASA. Due to their movement, the stars eclipse one another, just like the Sun and the Moon as observed from Earth. Astronomers have never found any evidence that stars eclipse one another, and scientists have also found out that they complete one full circle around each other every 51 days. Could the ancient Egyptians have known this? If we believe Bauval's theory of the star shafts, Thuban was immortalised inside the Great Pyramid, but it does seem highly unlikely that they knew its unusual binary properties due to the quality of telescopic instruments that was needed to view the phenomenon. Unless of course the Great Pyramid had some as yet unknown astronomical observatory function. Maybe the northern King's Chamber star shaft did have such a function. I honestly don't know, and wouldn't know where to begin with a hypothesis. The ancient pole star Thuban, now known as Alpha Draconis, is the primary star of the constellation of Draco. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Draco is represented by the hippo god Hezemut, which has a crocodile climbing on its back. This crocodile is what evolved into the serpent or dragon of the Greeks and Romans, and the Draco constellation does feature in a number of Greek myths.
So apart from astronomical alignments, the pyramids of Giza are special in many other ways. The numbers which are basically programmed into this fantastic building are reflecting a lot of data considering our planet. Information which should only be obtainable by a very intelligent and sophisticated civilization in the first place. On top to all of that, recently people who are deeply engaged in groundbreaking research have stated that there are additional shafts in the Great Pyramid, which align with another special twin star called Thuban, a celestial object which is often visualized in the Egyptian mythology or history as a being which is always accompanied by a reptile or crocodile-like being, which fits considering the system in which this star is located is called Alpha Draconis, even by our current civilization on Earth. So there could be some connections there as well, which is again feeding and playing into an invisible basement, a foundation which stabilizes the evil conspiracy of Earth-human ruling shape-shifting reptile gods, at least for the mental playground of some very naive or just unstable people. I digress. It's also to mention that most of these celestial alignments stand and fall with the current estimate of actual age of the pyramids of Giza. Because if our calculations are wrong, the location of the stars on certain points on the timeline would be very different, at least if we are speaking about raw errors of prognostication of multiple thousand years. So one reason for integrating this part in the video is to highlight the fact that humans, especially people who are conducting open-minded truth-seeking, tend to connect subjects on which we got low information in general, like the mostly broadly accepted mystery of the Great Pyramid, with the reptilian shape-shifting Anunnaki stuff, and quickly move to vague conclusions about potential origins and motives of some higher evolved alien race. So speaking of a potential origin, like we learned throughout the video, reptilian life is an ever-present thing on this planet. and the accessible data in all kinds of areas regarding the potential existence of more advanced and intelligent reptilian beings is showing a collective interest into this particular type of mythology. And connections, which are to find in old religious writings and traditions, are also feeding into this, even if the extraterrestrial reptilian shapeshifter theory is of complete fictional origin. So my personal opinion is that a strong religious belief can be the basement for a weakness to fall victim to a thing I call the interdimensional fallacy, which is basically a bias towards a certain explanation or origin, in this case interdimensional, for supernatural, high strangeness or pretty much unexplainable occurrences. I could be wrong here, but I really think there's absolutely zero reason for a normal, rational person to believe or favor a concept of other populated dimensions over extraterrestrials who populate the same dimension or reality. In terms of a model or framework of something to the effect of interacting with angels and demons on another frequency. I think if you favor that, you clearly seem to be highly influenced or formed by baseline Christian or other similar religious belief structures. And there's one case where a certain individual which seems clearly intelligent highly favors this type of religion in general over the concept of other intelligent life populating our universe in the same dimension, which is totally insane to me. But before I continue, I will run the clip to give more context.
Everyone wants to believe that it's aliens. And like, that's what I want to believe.
Of course.
I don't think that it is a foreign adversary. Like, I don't buy into the idea that the Chinese or the Russians have secretly figured this out. But then the question is, okay, well, what does that leave? And I feel like my gut is that it's something that is weirder than anything that anyone has made popular. Like, just as an example, it's literally bleeding in from some parallel dimension. It's an energy signature, and it's co-aligned by accident rather than intent, right? Like, it's there because there's something in its parallel universe that is similar to what we're doing, and that's why they're co-aligned. Like, I know this sounds like weirdo mumbo jumbo, but it seems like something like that even would be more likely. Did you ever read Michael Critchen's novel, The Sphere, or was it just Sphere?
No.
All right. You mind if I spoil Sphere for you?
Please.
So there was a movie. It was not nearly as good as the book. So in Sphere, without spoiling the ending, the very beginning of it is you have this researcher who is brought out to this secret naval research facility in the Pacific Ocean because the Navy has discovered a massive object, multiple kilometers long, lying on top of a shallow coral reef on some atoll covered in coral that appears to be a spacecraft, an alien spacecraft. And they figured out that when it crashed thousands of years ago there, it probably crashed onto an island, which then sea levels rose and then it became covered. So by this, they basically figure out it must have been there for about 3,000 or 4,000 years, this spaceship. And so the Navy is going and they're trying to figure out what it is. They're scraping coral off this ship. They bring in this researcher. And as the researcher is being brought to the site, they discover for the first time what they've been looking for, a door into the air. They were scraping the coral off, looking for some way in through this ultra tough metallic alloy that had never been observed ever in nature or science. And then the big reveal of like the first arc of the book is they scrape off the coral. They look at the door. Incredible, it's a door. But then they look next to the door and there's a marking. And what does the marking say on this 3,000-year-old spaceship? United States Navy and an American flag. And you know, what's interesting is they never actually fully explain it. But the implication is, and what they believe happened, is that this was a time-traveling craft that somehow went back in time, or alternately, that it's actually from some distant past civilization that traveled forward in time, like maybe went to space, did some exploring and came back. Maybe the United States is actually a purpose reconstitution of the branding and social structures of some long lost society from 500 million years ago. I'm not saying that's necessarily what's happening, but I think that that's actually more likely than it being aliens from another galaxy coming to where we are. It's just, that is actually harder for me to believe than something that is of our own little local solar sphere and just really truly bizarre and not being taken seriously.
Why is that harder to believe? Why is space travel harder to believe than time travel?
It's mostly all of the
dimension travel.
So dimensional travel, like that's totally believable. It's specifically the thing I think is least likely is that using normal conventional physics that we understand, it's people coming from another place that's many light years away coming to where we are. It's a matter of we haven't observed anything that could do that. We haven't seen any synthetic material that could do that. We haven't seen any natural phenomena that could
but if you just go back 200 years ago, a cell phone's impossible.
But the difference here is that we're able to see millions of years of history of the universe coming into us, right? We're observing things that happened hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago from all over our galaxy and other galaxies. And there's a lot of markers that you would expect to see that would line up with how we understand intelligent life. And we're just not seeing that.
So is he conducting active counterintelligence, or are these his serious, honest thoughts on the matter? I really don't know. I think this is the highest level of hubris, and it kinda hurts, because I'm actually the same age as him, and I see and recognize him as a guy from the same generation as me, and he got so much potential and actual reach to change the world. But his general take in regards to a potential explanation for UFO or high strangeness related things, favoring this interdimensional stuff so heavily over the possibility of it being in the same dimension but out of our range of imagination in this universe, is the ultimate showcase of human hubris to me. Coming from a fresh guy in his prime, making me losing some faith in our whole civilization. To prefer time travel and approaches like Michael Masters lays out in his extraterrestrial model is one thing, but to highly favor an interdimensional origin on, for example, things like the New Jersey mystery drones, just flat out in general, screams borderline insanity to me.
There's some pretty good ones, especially. You know, one of the crazy things when you do these live Q&As is some of them are very silly. So we got one. Mark, are the allegations true that you are secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that. I am not a lizard, but you know, keep the high quality comments coming in, please. This is surely on track to be a great live Q&A if we continue getting stuff at that level of quality. There's actually a lot of funny stuff in here too.
And to those who think this shooter is a hero because he did it because he said this healthcare executive was presiding over a healthcare system which kills thousands of Americans by denying them cover, what would you say to them?
You gonna cry?
I don't know what to say. I think I still think you should try to make an argument.
You should.
And I think this is you should, you know, there may be things wrong with our healthcare system. Oh wow. But you have to make an argument, and you have to try to find a way to convince people and change it by that. And this is, you know, this is not going to work. And I don't know. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, there are all sorts of things one could say about it, but
try one.
I don't think, and I think, you know, I think the motives feel. I don't want to go into all the particulars.
Make an argument.
I don't think there's anything heroic about him. I completely agree.
So even if the name Peter Thiel is an anagram for the Reptile, I'm still very confident believing that he's just a normal human like you and I, who was born on this planet. I think it's ridiculous to upload these types of videos and label it Reptile glitch or something along those lines. I get that Palantir and Thiel are highly criticized for a good reason, and I think it's just an unlucky possibility to have something like the Reptile as an anagram for your government name. I still believe it's some kind of nursery scheme in which the randomly added article, the, is just accepted as inherent part of the word reptile, which is not accurate in my opinion, apart from other logical approaches on why a very human-looking stressful situation should resemble anything related to a reptilian shape-shifting presence. I think we can call people a reptile if they always act cold-hearted and without empathy. And Peter Thiel and certain other polarizing controversial characters can honestly be labeled that way, but that's part of another discussion. So my current personal conclusion on the subject of the question of the existence of an intelligent extraterrestrial reptilian humanoid race looks like the following. Firstly, it's to say that I think that there are many stories present in terrestrial history and mythology all around the planet which have a certain, at least partially, more obedient frequency attached to higher evolved reptilian beings, like the Naga in India, dragons in China and North Europe, and also godly entities like Apophis in Old Egypt, for example. All these things could actually just relate to certain character traits instead of an actual reptile demigod entity, but that's up to interpretation. Regardless, snakes and serpents are clearly an ever-present and deeply embedded thing in our history on this planet. The second point is where I want to address the vanilla conspiracy of evil, shape-shifting reptilian beings summoned and nourished by alleged bloodlines conducted via different cults. I think this conspiracy connects many into one big pseudo-coherent super theory. Don't get me wrong, I don't think everything connected to these darker topics is pure BS, but I don't really got any reason to believe that all these pyramid structures, which are clearly somewhat real, are controlled by interdimensional demon-type reptiles. But I think a lot of people with more fragile minds or psychic diseases were misled into bad mind states, leading them to do horrible things to everyone but evil aliens who supposedly control our planet. So the third point of this personal conclusion is my, I would say, expectation correlating with my interpretation of a living cosmos, which allows the possibility of different strains of life which could also be reptilian to evolve on distant worlds, eventually leading their evolution to produce something which could resemble something similar to the appearance of actual reptilian humanoids. Of course, without any preconceived notions which are normally attached to their appearance, being evil, which is in my opinion just filling a role of a mythical anti-hero position we need in our reality to acknowledge the spectrum in which things happen we humans label good or evil.